Welcome to the Becoming an Ayn Rand Hero podcast. I'm Mark Michael Lewis, the profitability coach, and on this podcast we talk about Ayn Rand and how to apply her ideas to your real life so you can have more thriving, more prosperity and pleasure and purpose. And today we're talking with Kimi Avary, who is actually someone I have known for quite some time. We went through some personal development training back in the 90s. And over the years, I have watched Kimi develop into just an extraordinary leader and woman and teacher. And it's an absolute pleasure to be with her today. So she does relationship work and uses male-female dynamics and masculine-feminine to really help people transform their lives. And it's one of the things we love to talk about and one of the things we love to do. And in terms of Ayn Rand, I really want to talk with Kimi because she and I have had a number of conversations about Ayn Rand and our love of her and how we can take the best parts of her and use them constructively in our lives and with our clients. And so I thought it would be really fun to talk with Kimi today. So welcome, Kimi.
I'm really glad to be here, and I'm honored that you thought of me for the podcast.
Yes.
It's great.
Absolutely. So to start off, how did you get involved with Ayn Rand? Like, what was your initial meeting with her? What's your story with Ayn Rand?
I was given a book, Atlas Shrugged, actually, and it came from a friend of mine's grandmother. And I ended up reading about it. So we were down in LA, and my friend she was part of the Scientology church. We went to design school together. She had kind of an interesting past, and we were dear friends in design school. And I was over at her house one day, and her grandmother gave me the book, loaned it to me, actually. However, I never returned it. So
how ironic, how wonderful.
I apologize profusely for because I read it in 2 weeks.
Wow.
And it was my first book. I did go on to read The Fountainhead. However, Atlas Shrugged was the one that I read in 2 weeks, which is a long book in 2 weeks.
Yeah, 1,000 pages.
And it changed everything for me.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
That's a simple story. I stayed up till 3 o'clock in the morning every night reading it, getting up at 8, read all day for 2 weeks straight, and loved every second of it because it was a huge paradigm shift for me. From giving to other people as a self-sacrifice,
yes,
to living with myself in integrity.
That was very well put.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, I love hearing the stories of how people get introduced to her and what happens. I was similar. I just devoured the book and then read it again. Yeah. So in the process, that was some time ago.
It was 27 years ago, I think. And at the time, I had just gotten a new puppy, a little Chihuahua, and I named her Dagny. Her Dagny to remind me about living in integrity every single day, being true to my higher self. And Ayn Rand wouldn't have used those words, but for me, that's how I held it, which is about being in my truth, being the stand for what I believe in the world, the way Dagny did. And at one point, I received a letter from some friends of mine in the Bay Area. I had lumped all these people together in one big party when I would come up to visit in the Bay Area, and everybody got hurt feelings apparently. And so I received a letter saying that I was selfish and I'd hurt them and I was not spending my time properly, all this stuff. And I wept over the letter. I was really upset. And then I took my little puppy down to Melrose Cafe, which is where I hung out. And this gal meets my puppy. She says, "What's her name?" And I said, "Dagny." And she says, "Oh, is she an objectivist dog?" And I said, "Yes." And it just sort of cleaned up everything for me. Because that whole experience of having somebody call you selfish is something that women take so personally, typically. Mm-hmm. And yet I was self-interested in terms of taking care of how I could operate in the world, how I could spend time with people in a quality way. And I was taking care of me. And it's not always about other people.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
And so you named your dog Dagny to remind you. And having that really made a difference for you.
It did. And just a little bit further about background for me.
Sure.
I had spent most of my teen years and early 20s always taking care of other people. Taking care of myself was something that I'd never, ever done. Which is why I think that Atlas Shrugged had such a profound impact on me about the self-interest and living from your highest potential and living in integrity with who you are made such an impact on me. Without that, I had been scrambling to please everybody else. And at one point, I even went into a severe depression. It was about 20 years old. And I reached out to people who I'd been helping. And most of them didn't want anything to do with me. And so I proceeded to cross them off my list of people I would put my attention on. Mm-hmm. And then I had another depression. And I had a bunch more people that I crossed off my list. And now at that point, I had a handful of friends that I'm still friends with today.
They were your real friends. And
right.
And that process of actually reaching out to someone,
yeah,
and how they respond tells you about their relationship.
Tells you how much they value your sense of well-being also. And yes. From that place, I'll add to this, that from that place, I really got that the people that I needed to be in relationship with were people who were mutually supportive. People who were uplifting me as much as I was uplifting them. And that had to do with my self-interest. As well as them, I mean, I'm concerned for other people, and I want them to have the tools to flourish. And they also need to be self-interested enough to take care of themselves. If somebody's going to be a victim, if somebody's going to be a vampire and not take care of themselves, I don't have the bandwidth for it. And that's the virtue of selfishness, is being able to say that and not feel guilty about it.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And in owning that in yourself, that's being like Dagny in a way.
Yeah.
Right? What Dagny represented and what you got from Ayn Rand's novel is to really honor yourself.
Yeah. And what she did in the book, where she did take responsibility. That's a huge thing too, is taking responsibility for your actions instead of taking other people down with you. If you've got a vision that maybe is crazy, you stand in your vision and you go, okay, I'll dissociate myself. In fact, the movies portrayed this pretty well, where she said to Jim, you know, I'm going to create the railroad company on my own. I'm going to be off on my own. If I fall, I fall. And I'm not taking the company down with me. Mm-hmm. And she did that out of her conviction that she believed in what she was doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that conviction in what you're doing and who you are and how you want to be treated, right? Right? It means that some people are a good fit for you. Like when you're with them, you're both growing.
Right.
Other people, not so much.
Yeah. So
you can allow them to leave your life and surround yourself with people who inspire you.
Yes.
Right. And I'm guessing, and this is you could say in terms of Ayn Rand and her reputation, right? Because there's some people have really bad ideas about Ayn Rand.
Yes.
Right. And you could say one of those ideas is that in that situation, what you would do is you would go tear down all the people who aren't for you and tell them how they're wrong versus just letting them go. And some people think that Ayn Rand would have you actually tear them down, but you can just let them go and focus your attention on the relationships that really work for you. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's true.
Yeah, because when you're with people who you have the good match of values, people who you really enjoy, right, it allows your relationships to blossom. Right? And that's what you've been experiencing. That's more where you went.
Well, actually, I'm going to mention this because I think it's really important. In my program, I've got something called the Relationship Navigation System. And there's a section in the program called the 25% Rule of Relationships. And what that means is that each person should have a full, rich life so that they're not taking from each other and pulling. And then you have a base of 25% where you're really building the connection. And if you are sacrificing yourself all the time, now that doesn't mean there's not going to be some time when you're giving more than your partner's giving. That doesn't mean that. What it means is an expectation of sacrifice doesn't serve the relationship. Sacrificing your dreams and values to be in that relationship is never going to work for anybody. Expecting your partner to sacrifice theirs for you is never going to work for anybody. Right?
Yeah. You might stay together, right, out of some belief in the relationship, but you're not growing and they're not growing. Right. And you're missing out on what the relationship was intended to be, what it could be, what it is you actually want it to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't think people need to be 100% in alignment with what they are doing. Like my husband works down in Baja, California, teaching scuba dive instructors to be instructors. And I work up here in the Bay Area as a speaker and a coach, and I can take my work down to Mexico, and I can take it anywhere, really, because I do most of my work through phone and Skype. And we support each other in doing our different things. And we bring that into the relationship and flourish it by building up each other through the support, which is great. And we're not stomping on each other's dreams in order to make that relationship happen, which I think happens a lot. And it's very sad. And so I think that that's a huge foundation that I got from Ayn Rand.
Yeah. All of the characters in her novel were people who they were not the source of each other's life. They were not the purpose of each other's life. They were not the center of each other's life. They were partnered in the places that made sense and in their love for each other and in their respect for each other. And they had their own life in the process.
Yeah.
Right. Now, her characters weren't always married or, things like that. Right. But that idea of partnership, right? One of the ways I put it in my book is that you can try to adapt yourself to fit into the container, or you can adapt the container to fit your mutual selves.
Right.
Right. And I like that kind of like there's a 25%, right, where you're really working in the relationship, furthering the relationship. It's not that you're abandoning the relationship to have your own life. It's that you're actually creating and investing in the relationship so that you can each have your own lives together.
Yeah.
So you can each follow your own dreams and yet build the relationship rather than having it be either or.
Right. And it's really a sense of stickability. There's a Napoleon Hill phrase, and I'm not sure if it directly came from Napoleon Hill. There's a guy who wrote a book afterward called 3 Feet from Gold. Do you remember? Did you read that? Anyway, he coined the phrase stickability, and having a solid foundation in your relationship creates the space to do these other things. to me, the relationship is not the end all in our life.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're put here for more than that. Put here, whether I believe that there's more to life than just your relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And I was talking with a client earlier, and she is creating a movie right now.
Mm-hmm.
And she's in the process of building up the presence of this movie that she's doing, and it's a huge ordeal. And she and her boyfriend have been living in different cities. So he's going to be moving to LA, probably. And for her, having that foundation is the place to launch from.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's a great way for relationships to be, is to have the place to launch from.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of the expectation that we're going to do everything together all the time. And sometimes that works, and sometimes that's perfect. But it's not always the case. And if you have that expectation of it being a certain way, or you've imposed traditional views on marriage that it should look like this, and you haven't sorted out what you really want it to look like, you're going to be in trouble, and you're going to be disappointed.
Yeah, because it's not what you want.
Right. Well, we default into it. The second you get married, the archetype of marriage lands on your table, and if you don't,
I like that. It's like thunk.
It's right there, and you can say, "Oh, we're going to have a non-traditional experience," and boom, the second the papers are signed, the second you've said "I do," it lands there, and you have to unpack it again, and then be at choice. I visited a retreat center it's not a retreat center, a community in Italy. And the way they do marriage is they get married for a year, and then they get married for a year, and then they get married for a year. And they don't have divorce. And the woman who'd given us the tour had been married for 33 years. So everything I do is about helping couples to choose to be together, which is a very objectivist perspective. I'm at choice. I'm not defaulting into this. I'm not trapped in my relationship. It doesn't have to be the way society says it should look. How do we co-create what we want to experience? And that's about being a choice.
Yes. And sometimes when you do that, other people get confused. They don't like it. Sometimes people are into that.
It rocks the boat.
It rocks the boat, right? And negotiating with your partner to make sure that you guys are on the same page around it. Yeah. That requires some skill. It requires willingness, and it requires that integrity.
Yeah.
Right? So
my client said to me earlier today, we wouldn't have had the tools. I wrote it down. We would not have had the tools to have the difficult conversations that we're having had it not been working with you. Because I've empowered her to say the things that she needs to say to give him the quality information with which to be at choice with, so that he can decide how he wants to interact in this scenario. And women traditionally, or not traditionally, that's not the right word, women notoriously are bad about expressing what we need until we're upset without it. And then our feelings are hurt. And we decide that you don't love us enough, respect us enough, or care about us enough to do the right thing. So we slowly fall out of the tree of love based on expectations that you would do something a certain way, or that you would never do something that you did. And we're hurt. And we get hurt over and over and over, but we never share with you what we need instead. We just share with you. We might share with you that we're hurt, or that we're angry, or that we're frustrated. But we don't share with you, well, this happened. What I'm noticing is that I feel a little anxiety. What I need is this. We're not clear. And my job is to help women to be clear and men to hold the space so that she can be clear, so it's safe enough for her to express herself. And that's all the interplay of relationship dynamics. But it's all boils down to being at choice and owning your experience. It's mine. I'm responsible for my feelings. Nobody does anything to me. It's how I experienced it. Maybe I was triggered from a past experience, or maybe I was triggered by what just happened. Okay. I own it. I was triggered. This is what happened. How can we solve this problem? Which is one thing that men more often than not like to do. Solve the problem instead of hearing the grinding criticism that goes on and on and on. And bad feelings, and he feels responsible for her bad feelings, but he doesn't know how to fix it.
I know nothing about this. Nothing. I have never experienced that in my life. It was just, yeah. And you could say that this is a very masculine way of thinking, this problem solving classically, right? And bringing in the masculine in terms of Ayn Rand, right? I experience her as very masculine and not so much on the feminine. I am really curious how you, as an extraordinarily powerful feminine creature, right? As with that, how you honor the masculine in Ayn Rand and where you see the opportunities that Ayn Rand didn't discuss, right? How do you be a woman with this power of really honoring yourself?
It's tricky. It's very tricky. And so the way I describe it is every one of us has masculine and feminine within us. And my story is that 10 years ago was when I started understanding men. I started studying about men from a masculine perspective. Okay? It changed everything for me. And it also allowed me to step more into my feminine. So I know people who saw me before and then saw me afterward. They're like, I don't know what's different about Kimi, but there's something different. There's a softer, more flowing way of being. Okay? With that said, when I look at Ayn Rand, and I was just at a talk, an objectivist community talk a couple nights ago, and I was hearing the perspective, again, in the conversation with her being so cut and dry, very masculine mode. Because it's a spectrum of masculine and femininity, neither one of them is wrong. There are things that I, as a woman, can learn from the masculine perspective. There are things that the masculine perspective can learn from a feminine perspective. And that's not man and woman. It's masculine and feminine. So when I teach the 4 agreements, for instance, to my clients, it's really interesting because I usually have a woman or a group of women in there, and it's taught from a masculine perspective. Don't take anything personally. That's something you would learn in objectivism. Don't take anything personally. It's their stuff. Dagny, in the book, was able to not take things personally. Or if she did, she recognized that it was her own stuff, and that she was able to keep a sense of self that is a really unusual thing to do. Ayn Rand has been able to keep a sense of self, had been able to keep a sense of self, and that's a very masculine thing to do.
And so teaching the 4 agreements, when you bring in these masculine principles to women, how does that work? Well, and given that it's masculine, feminine, right, and we're really talking about masculine and feminine, and in general, as an average, as a probability, more men tend towards the masculine and women towards the feminine.
Right.
Yes.
Absolutely. In fact, when I teach the book, I'm so infused with Ayn Rand's work that it is a baseline for everything I do. Then I teach a book like The 4 Agreements and include Steve Andreas's responding to criticism strategy. Right? That changed everything for me. I mean, lots of things changed things for me.
Yes.
Everything.
Yes.
But really, learning how to say, this is me, and this is somebody else's viewpoint of me. Is this true, or is this not true?
Is there anything I want to learn from that?
Right. Is there some grain of truth that I need to include, or is it all BS? Is that just their perspective? And the more we can ask, what can I learn from this? The And that goes with anything. The more we have the opportunity to see if something's a fit for us, number one. Number two, to see how we can integrate that skill into our experience. So when I hear Ayn Rand talk about choice and about standing in your power and being integrous, I look at the ways that I can bring that into my life, as well as being the nurturing feminine woman. And because Ayn Rand really wasn't exactly a nurturing feminine woman.
No. And Dagny, I don't know if you remember the line when she gets challenged. She says, the woman says, "Well, I'm now the woman in the family." Her brother gets married, right? And the woman says, "I'm now the woman in the family." And Dagny looks at her and says, "That's fine. I'm the man." Right?
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember that part.
I do remember that.
It's
And if you think about it contextually, when Ayn Rand was writing, the feminist movement was working its way up. Women were earning the power and proving and fighting for that strength to be in the world and stand in that power. What we've done as a result has been pretty amazing things. However, we've been in competition with men instead of in a partnership with men in a way that can work. I'm actually doing a project with Shell Oil coming up. And it's for the women engineers who are drilling engineers for Shell. They work in a predominantly masculine environment. And we're bringing in the masculine and feminine concept and how to navigate the workplace experience so that it's a win-win. And part of the title is Beyond the Glass Ceiling. Because I don't believe that, well, actually, let's look at Ayn Rand here for a second. She's been appreciated, valued by a handful of people. And she came into it in many ways in such a masculine mode that many of her concepts weren't received, right? Had she brought in a bit more feminine perspective on it, on how to navigate it, the things that she valued would still be present, but they wouldn't be lost. The way a lot of them have been like, "Ooh, she's too masculine," and there is a turnoff on that, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does, and part of it is, you could say that culture as a whole right now is really trying to reprioritize the feminine.
Yeah.
Right, and in the process, it is taking down the masculine.
Yeah.
Right.
And that doesn't work from my perspective. It doesn't work. I see a lot of men in the world so guarded and shielded because it's not a safe place to be in the world with most women. In the world, I see men being attacked by the feminine, and that's the competition model. And we're not appreciating the values that the masculine model brings in. But the masculine isn't really seeing women bringing the feminine model to the table.
Because they're competing on the masculine rather than bringing their complement.
Right. So what I'm inviting women to do is to be able to step into their feminine, learn how to navigate the masculine, and then men will support them in bringing the feminine model to the world. Instead of seeing women and the feminine model going, "Yeah, we want more of that, but you're shooting us down in the process," which doesn't really serve anybody. Because there are things that the masculine brings into the world that is hugely valuable. And there are things that the feminine brings into the world that are hugely valuable. That makes sense?
Yeah, it does. In terms of Ayn Rand,
Yeah.
right, and her novels, her various characters, and you could say their embodiment of the masculine or feminine, what's something that you believe fits with Ayn Rand, right, and really honoring yourself, but has a feminine expression, right, in terms of what you believe the feminine brings that perhaps Ayn Rand underappreciated or didn't talk about?
Yeah. What the feminine brings is the ability to turn inward and listen to your inner wisdom. And I would say that Dagny probably had that because she was listening to her inner guidance. And Ayn Rand acknowledges that, but from a masculine perspective, I think.
Yeah, she's purposeful.
It's driven instead of the wellspring of possibilities and creativity that can come from listening to that inner wisdom. And this is sort of controversial in some ways because Ayn Rand she called herself an atheist. And to me, had she written in today's world, she quite possibly could have written about the divine within. Does that make sense?
That is a very big topic.
It is.
That's a very big topic.
I know, and yet I think that it is a big topic, and I think that is a feminine place of turning inward and getting wisdom. Being out in the world is producing, turning inward and tapping into universal consciousness, or whatever you would want to call that. The thing that is. It doesn't even have to have any spiritual connotations, but there's something more.
Reality. The reality of which we are a part. This universe that I like to say that it's a universe in which atoms paired together to form molecules, and molecules paired together to actually form proteins and eventually cells. And cells grew into more cells, into plants and animals, finally into a creature that could ask the question, how is it that atoms turned into molecules, right? Right. Whatever it is about this thing we call reality, whatever it is about that had that happen, and that allows me to feel love and joy and vision and purpose and friendship and honor, whatever it is about this thing called reality that has it do that, I call that divine.
Yes. And I sort of short-circuited a little bit by saying, if you take all the ingredients in a cell and you put them in a petri dish, it's not going to live. There's something else that you cannot create in a petri dish that sparks life. Whatever that thing is, that's divine. Right? So it's something bigger than what we can conceive of, that we are all a part of. That space is the space of possibility and wisdom to me. And I call that, accessing that and listening. Men and women, of course, can listen. And again, it's masculine and feminine, not men and women. So when a man turns inward and listens to inner guidance, or a woman does the same thing, to me that's accessing the feminine wisdom.
The creative
quality.
So again, I'll go back to Atlas Shrugged.
Yeah.
There was a point where Dagny finally left. She quit. Yeah. She didn't quit as part of the plan. She just quit. And she went up to the cabin in the woods. And she was in the cabin in the woods for 3 weeks. And there's a scene in which she's going crazy because she's so creative and she can't use her masculine to make it happen. So she's just like, we could build a path here and build orchards there, and then we build a track from the thing. She's all, stop thinking these thoughts that you can't actually make happen, right? She'd say, we could move the road. That way we don't have to have that bridge and it doesn't flood out every year. In fact, we could do, she's like, no, stop it, right? And this balance, what I'm hearing you say is that creative part of her that's like, how can we make it better? How can it be more beautiful? what's awesome about this? What am I really feeling? What do I really want? That constant creativity has a feminine part to it, where that divine inspiration, that divine creativity, has a feminine feel. Is it?
Yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And women, the feminine, typically are the supporter, adapters, and enhancers of life. So we enhance the world we live in. If you talk to a man who's a bachelor, typically he doesn't have enhancement around him. I know a woman who's a coach for fresh bachelors, and she helps them create a space so that they can bring somebody new in there.
Instead of a bachelor. Yeah.
Right? It takes that feminine person who can enhance his experience.
Yeah, who pays attention to the larger context and the story and the environment in which the masculine is doing his thing. Right. Yeah, I really like, and I haven't thought of it before in terms of that scene, but that balance of masculine and feminine in that scene, where her creativity is just like, here's what we could do, and I'm going to clean up those steps, and I'm going to clean out this thing, and I'm going to make everything more beautiful, more copacetic, something that I feel good about. I'm going to constantly be looking at, okay, so how can I improve this? How can I enhance this? Right? And then the masculine is like, okay, I'll make it happen. I'll do this, and I'll do this, and I'll do this.
Right. And to add to that, one of the things that happens for women is when our world is upside down, the more chaotic it is, the more we enhance, the more we try to make order out of chaos. Because our world screams at us, fix me, do this, do that. And that's actually a great example of the feminine showing up, because she's got all these thoughts. She's trying to make order out of the chaos that has been going on in her life. Right?
Yeah. So this balance of masculine and feminine, both within the person and within a relationship, when I read Ayn Rand, I don't get that so much. Right? She's just all masculine. Okay, we're going to negotiate this, we're going to do this. And earlier, when you were talking about what it was like to really choose what it is you want, and to talk about, okay, you're going to go into a relationship and you're going to say, here's what I want, here's how I feel. Right? If you were to do that in an Ayn Rand style, it would be, here's what I'm going to do, and here's what I feel, and this is what you should, right? And that, I don't suggest Ayn Rand for people in terms of relationships.
It doesn't work. It doesn't work.
It doesn't work. It doesn't even work just among men. Although if you're in a hyper masculine situation, let's say business or something, where it's like, okay, all emotions aside, let's do this. In that little context, that works. But in actual human relationships, all the juice is in how do you feel in the process of having those negotiations, of having the relationship.
Yeah. So when we were talking earlier about the feminist movement and being in the workplace and being directive and being in competition with men, and the way we speak to men impacts how they show up. Are they treating you as a competitor, or are they treating you somebody to provide for, to build up, to produce for, right? So you're either the queen or you're another man.
Mm-hmm. And as the queen, you're someone that they can provide for and be the king.
Yeah. So how we talk to them in terms of, I teach women how to ask for a time to talk, how to express what works, what's already working, what they're already doing, what you need in order to be happy. And bullet pointed, how to talk in bullet points, not necessarily talk in feelings, and then let them know, or let him know, what it would provide for you, because nothing is worth doing just to be done. Everything is worth providing for me. right?
Yeah, just pause for a moment, because that's such a big idea. It could go by really quickly, right? But it's such a big idea. If I'm providing, when I'm in my masculine, when I'm providing, it's a whole different experience than if I'm competing.
And add to that that it takes the feminine to be receptive, which changes the whole dynamic. Because if we're in masculine mode and we're producing and we're accountable for producing, and or we think we're accountable and he thinks he's accountable, that's where you butt heads. So I actually have a program called Parenting Year One, because the second a baby's born, she goes into masculine mode, mama bear, and they're battling instead of being in partnership with it. So sorting through the difficult conversations of who's accountable for what, when. And once you have that clarity, then she can receive sometimes, and he can receive sometimes, or allow her to take ownership of a particular thing. And I say allow, and I don't want that to mean he's in control, because it's not that. It's about who is accountable for
And
what.
if he thinks he's accountable for it,
Right.
then he's going to think that he should be the one who says how it's done.
Right. Women have a huge aversion to being controlled by men. And it has nothing to do with control. It has everything to do with accountability
Yeah.
and possibility.
Yeah, pausing again for a moment, I'm imagining how this will play out at Shell.
Yeah.
Right? Which is because, coming back to this idea that you just started with, like as soon as we got in, which is the idea of integrity, of owning yourself, of saying yes to yourself.
Yeah.
Right? The feminine, to the degree, is it can, when it's not working right, it can not ask for what it wants. Instead of saying, okay, I am a woman, I'm a feminine, I want something, right? I can translate my want into something the masculine can understand.
Yes.
Right? Okay, do this for me and I will feel like this. And then he can go, oh, I can do that and provide. And so I hear you saying that when you allow yourself, when you give yourself the right, I say to think what you think and feel what you feel and want what you want.
Yeah.
Right? When you own yourself, then you're free to actually be and ask for what you want. And you can ask for it in ways that men respond. Right?
Well, they respond well to. And you can ask for it in ways that don't work. Right? And
again, I've never experienced this in my life.
You're asking it from a masculine perspective, you're going to get pushback. If you ask for it from a feminine perspective and let him know what it would provide for you, you're going to have set it up so he can win and want to provide the things that you need. Now, I want to back up, though. It's also about our boundaries, because women aren't born knowing what we need until we're upset without it. And we're not born with boundaries. So we tend to merge. If we had boundaries, we would not have a species. The babies would die. Oh, I'm sorry, I can't feed you right now. I'm tired. Right? So instead, we work ourselves like crazy to do everything, to be everything for everybody without paying attention to ourselves. And when we do that, it's a setup for total disaster in your relationship. So it requires knowing what you want. And I guide men on how to help her get clarity. She's like going crazy, and you go, okay, let me pause you a second. I'm clear that there's something that you need. I'm not totally clear what it is. Can we sit down and try and figure out what that is? Because I really want to support you in being happy and having what you need.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah. And that kind of oh, that kind of question, right?
Yeah.
You train men on how to help a woman figure out what she needs, what she wants, what she feels, so that she can then put it into masculine words so you can give it to her. I mean, or yeah, not masculine words.
Put it through the masculine translator.
Thank you. Yes, translate their feeling into something that the man can understand, not going into the masculine, because that creates the.
Well, and here's one thing that's kind of interesting. Men typically, so men and women both feel things deeply. Okay, men feel things, then think about it, then decide how they're going to act. Women feel things and then act. Right? Men don't trust feelings because they're going to do the hard thing. Even if, let's say, they're afraid to go to war, but they think it's the right thing to do, they're going to go. Women would feel terrified. Not every woman, of course. We've got women in the military now. But we'll feel something and then act on it. So we ask you how you feel about something, and you're like, it's totally irrelevant how I feel. I may love you, but that doesn't mean I should marry you. Right? And we think that's going to inform how you will act. It doesn't work that way. So the way we talk to men, we have to give them quality information. We have to find a time to talk because the masculine energy is single focused and driven.
You have to get his attention.
You have to get his attention. And when you do, he'll be single focused on you, which is great. And that's what most women want, but they don't know how to get there.
And then that you were talking about translating into that masculine translator.
Yeah.
Right? I really like it because there's this translation process where the woman feels something, right? And she wants to communicate that to the man. She wants the man to respond. She needs to speak her feelings in a way that translates into something he can understand, something he can do. Like you said, quality information.
Quality information. I had a client one time who had been in a cumulative of 20 years of relationships, 15 years with one woman and 5 with the other. And when he learned this, he was like, I never knew what they needed. They spent hours and hours and hours and hours and hours talking about how upset they were. And he listened, and he's actually quite a feminine man in the sense that he's in tune with his inner wisdom. And he listened, and he listened, and he listened, and he listened, and he couldn't ever win with them because they never gave him the quality information.
Yeah.
And women do this all the time.
Yeah, and so as a man,
yes,
I appreciate you teaching women how to give men, right, quality information so that I can provide, right? The masculine, feminine thing. I appreciate that. I also appreciate you teaching men how to listen to the woman so that he can pull out the quality information.
Yeah. In the relationship navigation system, I have studio audios that are more streamlined, and it's really clear and concise about what's important that everybody needs to know. Guys, you need to know this. Gals, you need to know this, and back and forth. And I have to be careful because it's easy to weigh it more on the feminine and what she needs to do versus what he needs to do. And the famous question I always get is, why do I have to do all the work? My answer is not exactly sufficient for some people. Is that because we can do the work. And so everything that I can do, all the tools that I can give to the guys and make sure the gals hear that I'm giving them the tools really help. Because then she's going to get it. Here's the deal. I can help a relationship be saved just by working with a woman. Why?
Not going to happen just with the guy.
Not going to happen with just a guy.
Not gonna happen.
And it's because men respond to women. And the single most important factor for relationship longevity in a 40-year-long study done at UC Berkeley. Mm-hmm. You want to guess what it was?
That women feel like men listen, or no?
No. It's a woman's ability to recover after an argument. Because you've experienced it, or maybe you've never experienced this.
Yes, again, never. I have never had a woman upset with me, ever.
You can.
But I can imagine.
Well, you can be all fine and happy and have sort of regrouped after an argument, and if she's still pissed, it doesn't matter.
The argument is still on. The argument is still on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if she can regroup and come back to the relationship and say, hey, we both participated in that. That didn't go the way I wanted it to. I'm sorry I hurt you. And then he'll go, God, I'm sorry I hurt you too. And then you can begin to build again. And relationships require that over and over and over and over again.
Yes.
It is not a done deal. I was talking to a client earlier today, and she said, well, that innocent trust that I had is gone. And I said, that's normal.
Good. Now it's time to build non-innocent trust. Now it's time to build real trust with who this person really is.
Right. It's normal. And to have this fantasy and illusion that there's never going to be a problem in your relationship kills most relationships.
Mm-hmm. And the fact that there is a problem means that there's something wrong, rather than, of course there's a problem. You're two different human beings with two value systems and probably different masculine and feminine characters.
Yeah.
The chances that you're going to just fit all the time are nil. You're going to have things. The question is, what do you do when it happens?
Right. So the way I describe it is that it's like we're two comets coming together, right? So we have these long tails of all of our past, our history, our stories, what we value, and all of that stuff. And all of that is coming with us as we meet. Each person is like a unique snowflake. We're all different. I mean, we've heard that before, but it's true.
And in relationship, that means that your snowflake needs to fit with their snowflake. And that's tough with unique snowflakes. You're going to, right? I'll say one more thing about this to.
Go ahead.
Right. Because Ayn Rand, it's about dealing with reality.
Yeah. Accept
reality as it is. And sometimes our culture says, or I think, we should be the same. Men and women should be the same. I should be the same as another person. And that way it's easy to work together. Right? Yeah. But the reality is, if you actually look at it, masculine and feminine are different, and more women tend to have more of the feminine characteristics and men more of the masculine. Right? Almost to the point where it's a majority. Almost to that point. Right?
Almost.
Yes.
And I can tell you, every time I say men are and women are, heads roll.
So we live in a society. We live in a society in which saying that is politically incorrect.
That's right.
Right. It could mean, right, and this gets pre-Ayn Rand, right? It could mean that men are better than women, that men should dominate women, that women are less than men, right? Which historically has been, the case for the last 2,000 years in Western society, right? Men have had superior position, and that has profound impacts on society, on the woman's character, absolutely, right? And now women are starting to own more of their masculine. They're starting to say, we are equal, right? In fact, if you don't say that, you are an asshole. If you suggest that they're in fact different, not only equal, but then you're an asshole. And right, this is, I believe, general cultural context.
Yeah.
But the reality is, and this is Ayn Rand, right? Come back to reality. Just keep coming back to reality. Put your reason on it. Take responsibility. Demonstrate respect so you can realize what's possible, right? Just come back to reality. The reality is that men and women have natural patterns, and you can work with them. The feminine will, when there's conflict in the relationship, she'll notice the places where it's out of sync more than the man.
Yeah.
Right? She'll notice, I'm not feeling well. The man will just kind of, oh yeah, whatever. She'll go, I'm not feeling well. I am the one who sees what we can do to make it better. Right? I experience the friction more than the man. And so I'm the one who can say, here's where the friction is, let's fix it.
Yeah.
Right? I feel that. And if men can learn to listen to that, if men can learn to listen to, she's complaining because there's something wrong.
Yeah. So
She wants something. If I want to be in partnership with her, I need to find out what she wants.
Right. And that's the deal, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's how can I help her to identify what's underneath that complaint?
Yes. And
without backing away.
Mm-hmm. And Ayn Rand is horrible for that. She's absolutely horrible for that because she is such an interrogation, right? And you can't interrogate the feminine. You can help her come to her words. You can work with her to find the words for it.
Yeah.
If you interrogate the feminine, she's going to be pissed off.
Well, yes. Okay, so you've said a bunch of things.
Okay, good.
I'm gonna try to. There are a couple points that I wanted to make. So number one, the way I describe it, men and women are so different that we would be better off if we actually spoke different languages, because then we wouldn't think we were communicating. Right?
We would realize that the translation must happen.
Right. So when men and women are communicating, I actually have a program called The Real Truth About Successful Communication Between Men and Women. Mm-hmm. Because the masculine wants to fix things, and they get blamed for fixing them. But women also do it. If you're emotionally upset, we want to fix that. Again, this goes back to making order in our environment. Mm-hmm. We feel upset emotions as a threat to our environment. Mm-hmm. It could be a threat to our physical safety, but it could also be a threat to our environment. Our provider's upset, our provider's out of a job, our provider's stressed about something. Even if we think we're equals, we think we're the same, we've got these operating systems going on underneath about the masculine and feminine. So I like to say we're equal and different because we bring different resources to the table. And with both the masculine and feminine coming together, we have an incredibly powerful pair or partnership that is amazing when you realize and recognize and honor those differences.
Have them be compliments.
What's that?
Have them be compliments. How they complement one another. The masculine brings his strength. Yes, it's interesting context for that.
Yeah, and I'm actually pretty much not into the idea of compromise. Mm-hmm. I think compromise can set us up for failure. And relationship success depends on making great deals.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and just to compromise, on the one hand, is sacrificing yourself.
Right.
It's not honoring yourself. Making great deals is making sure that you honor yourself and the other person.
Yes.
Find a way of honoring yourself so that you can work with the other person rather than sacrificing yourself so that they get what they want. That compromise, I bring that in. How does compromise relate to great deals?
Well, compromise kills deals because it's all about self-sacrifice. And again, this goes back to Ayn Rand's philosophy. Is that it's about being true to yourself. So years ago, when I was reading much of her material, I spent a lot of time reading the Ayn Rand's lexicon. And one of the sections that I remember reading was about sex and about not giving yourself in self-sacrifice when you're having sex. Now, that translates to other areas of your life, right? You can't actually do it, but it translates into everything.
Yeah. The thought is abhorrent. It's sad. It's ugh.
And so I like it because it's so in your face about it. You can't have sex from a self-sacrificial perspective, right? You can't have a great relationship from a self-sacrificial perspective. You must be clear about what you need. In fact, there's a talk I do called what do I call it? 3 ways to get your needs met in your relationship. Number 1, know what you need. Number 2, express what you need to your partner in a way that your partner can get it. So that's that translation piece.
Yes.
Number 3, be happy with what you get. From like your partner steps up to the plate and provides what you need. Be happy. A lot of women experience this unhappy on principle. I'm never going to show you I'm happy because then you're going to stop doing the things you do. How does that work out? It doesn't really.
Yeah. Kind of the opposite for the masculine.
Yeah. If you can win the little things, in fact, this client I was talking to earlier today, her guy is talking about moving to LA with her, and that's just great. They're moving toward getting engaged. They're not there yet, but they're moving toward it. They're having conversations because she's having the difficult conversations. And I said, you've got to make sure to find him right when he's doing the little things that make your life better, when he's doing the little things that you're telling him about that you need, that he's paying attention to what's important to you. And you've got to make a point of letting him know, that was great. I needed that. Your showing up for me makes all the difference. And every time you can do that for your man, he's going to come a little closer. He's going to feel a little safer. He's going to feel like he can accomplish the job of making you happy. And even though it's not his job to make you happy, a lot of men think that, in fact, my husband said, it works out much better when I think it is.
Yes. It's only my job. I think about it. It's only my job to make my wife happy if I want happiness.
Exactly.
Right? If I want her happy, and when she's happy, I'm happy. Right? Because when she's happy, I'm winning. Right? Like,
it boils down. It's so simple.
So she and I have a game we do where she'll say, "Oh, could you do this for me?" And I'll go, "Yeah," and I try to say yes to what it is she's asked for, and sometimes she'll go, "Well, I don't know if you need to do that." Like, she'll say, "Oh, I want this." I say, "Would you like me to do this?" Trying to provide for her, trying to find something like, "Oh, was that a request?"
Right.
What? Okay, so I try to provide, and she might say, "Oh, well, no, you don't need to do that." Right? We can do that later. But I can tell that she'd prefer it done now. Right? And so I'll say, "I'll do it." And she'll say, "Yes." And I'll go, "Hero man." Like, "Here I come to save the day." Right? And it's this game we play where I do sweet things for her. And she calls me hero man. Right? So because this reality of masculine, feminine, men, women, like you say, it's true enough that it's almost better if we spoke different languages.
Yeah.
Right? It's that helpful, that important, that useful. Accepting that and actually dancing in what's possible, what that makes possible. Because the more I try to win and she lets me win, she makes sure that I win. Like you were saying, it's like, feel what you want, right? Ask for it in a way that he can get it for you, right? And then enjoy what he's given you. Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah. It's like every time I do that, she goes, yay. And every time she thanks me, every time she feels good, she actually accepts it. I feel stronger. I feel more alive. I want to make her happy more because that's a winning game. I like playing games that I win. I don't like playing games I don't win.
Right.
I don't like playing games I don't win.
Okay, so let's segue back to Atlas Shrugged.
Yes.
What happens when all the creators of the world go on strike? They're tired of playing a game that they can't win. Mm-hmm. We're going to go and play in our own playground. We're going to go on strike. Mm-hmm. Right? And men will do that. They'll leave relationships, and the last word that they say is, you need to find somebody who can make you happy, because I clearly can't make you happy. And she's like, no, but you can. You just won't do those things. A man will provide what he can based on the information he has. Younger men typically have a little bit more flexibility in that. Older men, they're going to provide what they want to provide. So if a woman meets that man and it's a match, he wants to provide what she wants to receive, awesome. Sometimes it's not a match. She wants to receive something that he doesn't want to provide, and it will never be a match. Doesn't matter how much he loves her, right? And when you can be in a relationship and look at what you can do for yourself, and there are certain needs you need to get met there are certain things you need to get met in your relationship, and those are the requirements. They must be there or it will never work. Mm-hmm. Then there are things that you need, and those are negotiable. How do you get them met in your relationship? And if they can't be met there, how can you get them met outside your relationship in a way that still serves the relationship? Mm-hmm.
Their needs.
Their needs. They're flexible. Not that they're not important. They're very important, because if you don't have them, you will be unwell without them, or upset, or off balance. So they are important. However, you may not need to get that met from your partner. So if a woman needs to talk all the time about all the things that are important to her, and she goes on and on and on and on, and there's never an end point.
She needs to talk to her women friends.
Yeah. And then she can bullet point it for her partner. Mm-hmm. And there are times when the guys need to learn how to just sort of imagine he's walking on the beach and spread a beach blanket and say, pour out everything. You've got my whole evening. Tell me everything. And he's going to get a lot of points for that.
He's going to get a lot of points for that.
Yeah. And she'll be happy. And again, it boils down to what we can do for each other that serves each person. Mm-hmm. So I've got another part of my program called the Platinum Rule of Relationships. Mm-hmm. And the golden rule is to do unto others as you would have them do for you. Mm-hmm. That does not work very well in relationships.
Masculine, feminine, want different things. Give to partner what you want, but not what they want. Not work.
Not work. The platinum rule is to do unto others as they would have you do for them. And sometimes that's not in your comfort zone, and sometimes it's not even in your immediate repertoire. And you can learn those skills, especially with what you said earlier, the desire to have a happy relationship. I want this. How can I have that? Well, I need to be attentive to my partner's needs. But it's not in selfless service, because that's BS. It's in service of co-creating a partnership that works.
Yeah. And again, coming back to Ayn Rand.
Yeah.
Right? The reality is I have my thoughts, feelings, and desires. And the other person has their thoughts, feelings, and desires. That's the reality. Right? We use reason to try to figure out what are their desires and what do I want to do such that I can help them fulfill their desires and help them fulfill my desires so we can partner together. Right? It's respect. The more I honor myself, the more I can honor my partner.
Yeah.
The more I recognize that what I want and what I think and what I feel, especially my requirements, then my needs, but also just some wants, some things that I want, right? That if I take responsibility for asking my partner for it, for teaching them how to give it to me, to working with them so that they can give it to me, and I really look for, so what is it that they want? Right? What is it that they want? What would make them happy so that we can work really well together?
Yeah.
And how can I tell them what I want?
Yeah.
Such that they can give it to me, right?
Yeah.
Then we can realize what's possible. That to me seems like the essence of Ayn Rand's interpersonal philosophy, even if it wasn't played out in her characters, right? Her characters had virtually no feminine, right? All the feelings were in the weak characters. All the feelings were, or all of the complaint-oriented feelings were in the villains. And all of the grand, noble feelings were in the protagonists, the heroes, right? And I really appreciate keeping the essence of what it is she's about, which is deal with reality, bring your reason, take responsibility, respect your partner, give them value so that they can give you value, and build a value exchange in emotions. Let her enhance you, guys. Right? And take pleasure in actually doing what she asks for so that you can get that cycle.
Right.
I think that bringing in that feminine side of it, adding the feminine part to the equation, right, in alignment with Ayn Rand, is just, it's advanced, but it's common sense. It's like, of course, that's how you deal with the reality of men and women in relationships.
Well, it's common sense when you get it, right?
Yeah.
It's like, duh. When I first learned this 10 years ago, the light bulb went on. Oh my God, number one, there's something I can do to fix my relationship situation. I always wanted to be married and have a family, and I couldn't figure out how to make that happen. I was really confused. I dated a lot of people, couldn't figure out how to create that. And it was because I was their buddy, not the woman that they wanted to marry.
Not the queen.
I wasn't their queen. And I wasn't versed in how to allow a man to contribute to me, which is very different than the idea that they want to control you. And yet, some of the behaviors are actually really similar.
It's how you interpret it.
And you can confuse them, right?
Yeah. So it's not obvious. It's in fact quite difficult given the perspectives we come from. As a man, I have spent hour upon hour upon hour trying to understand what it is she wants. Right? And to take that perspective, I've spent hours practicing that and go, no, Mark, just listen, try to find out what she wants. Because my nature, you could say my masculine nature is just, do you know what you want? Great. I'll do it. If you don't, okay, look, all this stuff, I don't have time for that. I'm just frustrated. I'm losing. And that's.
And we want to tell you all the details.
Yes. And so me taking that on and a woman taking that on is not obvious. Right. And adding that to the Ayn Rand world, right, where you can really take on masculine and feminine rather than just being all masculine, is so important.
Yeah, and there's so much in our culture that we've got one way of looking at the feminine. We want to bring her up. We want to empower the feminine, and yet we don't know how to do that. We can do a goddess ritual. We can do all kinds of things. But in reality, there are certain ways to empower the feminine. One is to set a time parameter on how, I want to hear everything you have to say. And you know what? I've got an hour. Or I've got 5 minutes right now, and I can make time for you later. But it's all about making deals about how it works together. And there are certain things that women can do to create a safe space for men. Men can do to create a safe space for her. And they're different. So, well, there are so many ways that we must communicate. It's really kind of astounding that we.
It's astounding that it works as well as it does.
Right.
Right. But fortunately, you can learn this stuff.
Yes.
You can. You can actually take a course and like listen and go, this is a way of thinking about it. When I think about it this way, I perceive choices I didn't have before.
Absolutely.
Right? It's not like you're doing what you're supposed to do. It's just that when you think about it the right way, all of a sudden, all kinds of choices come up for you. It's like, I'll do that. I like to tell my clients, we don't put our hand on a hot stove. Why not? Because we know it burns. Right? When you start to understand how from a masculine perspective, how the feminine works, or if you as a woman start to understand how the masculine works, then all of a sudden you just go, I'm not going to put my hand on that hot stove. That would burn. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do this instead. It's like it just makes sense to do the things that work. Because when you do the things that work, your relationship thrives. You're more free to be you. They're more free to be them. And we get to build a relationship together.
That's right. Absolutely. Yeah.
Right.
Being responsible for your actions, being responsible for your communications,
Yes.
being responsible for how you show up. And when we learn new ways of being and we learn to integrate the new skills into our system, it makes it, the system being the couple, dyad, it gives us the possibility of having amazing relationships.
Not magic. I like to say it's not magic.
Right.
Right? It's just clear thinking. It's just clear understanding. It's caring and using it. It's deal with reality. Bring it. Oh.
There are 3 things that I say for relationship success. You must understand the opposite sex. You've got to. If you don't, you're going to get tripped up every time. We have differences. You're going to get tripped up. You can be the most spiritual, conscious person in the world and still get tripped up by those differences.
Different worlds.
The second thing is that you must learn to navigate those differences. It's one thing to understand them. It's another thing to learn how to navigate those waters, because you're going to get tripped up and you're going to be building a new muscle, a new skill set into your life. And when you get them, it's amazing what's possible. And then the third step is about living your life in love and managing your energy. And living your life in love, to me, is coming from a self-integrous place, finding joy within yourself, finding love within yourself, and radiating that outward. Because that begets more of that in your relationship. So it creates that upward spiral of living your life in love and in partnership and in true harmony.
Yes. True harmony, not
True harmony.
A romantic fantasy, but actual harmony.
Yeah.
Yes, more and more, but only forever.
Exactly.
Right, as you learn to understand your partner. Well, so thank you, Kimi.
My pleasure. This has been a lot of fun.
Yes, and perhaps we'll continue the conversation later.
I would love that.
Okay. Thank you again. This has been Becoming an Ayn Rand Hero. I'm Mark Michael Lewis, the Profitability Coach, and this is Kimi Avary. What do you call yourself? What's your website?
Conscious Couples Network. Mm-hmm. And I call myself a relationship navigation specialist.
The relationship navigation specialist. Figure out what it is, navigate it. Yes.
Yeah. And every call that I do with people, I do live calls based on the relationship navigation system. And every call, it's going to be different content. And what's so interesting, because people bring their real life stories and experiences, and we navigate that. So my job is to help you to navigate it well so that you can get the relationship that you truly want.
Amen to that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
My pleasure.